Very often, patients or their family members will come to me completely frustrated and overwhelmed after attempting to navigate the health insurance claims process on their own. Unfortunately, many times, the patient has already unknowingly harmed their truly legitimate claims, and there's really nothing that we can do to help at that point. Having a basic understanding of the process and the type of information necessary to prove the medical necessity of treatment can mean the difference between a claim approval and a claim denial. Navigating the health insurance claims process can be extremely frustrating and confusing, especially when you're battling an eating disorder or helping somebody battle an eating disorder. However, a basic understanding of the process and following these few key tips can mean the difference between a claim approval and a claim denial. The first and probably most important tip that I can give a patient or their family is to obtain a full copy of their health insurance policy and all applicable guidelines. Very often, an insurance company will assert that a treatment is simply not covered unless it meets the medical necessity criteria set forth in their internal guidelines. However, many times, those guidelines are not actually contained in the policy. So it's important that you obtain a full copy of your policy and the guidelines. You can go to the insurance company directly, and many companies have their guidelines online. The second important tip is to obtain and keep full copies of all treatment records that you receive from all of your outpatient treatment teams and any treatment facilities that you may have entered at any time. You're going to need these reports later if it becomes medically necessary for you to enter a higher level of care. You'll also need them if you start with a new outpatient treatment provider. They should have an accurate picture of your treatment history. The third tip that I would provide patients and their families is to document all interactions that you, your representatives, or your treatment providers have with your insurance company. This is essential because if you do not document all of your interactions, you have absolutely no proof that they actually occurred. Very often, patients or their treatment providers will tell me that they've had the communications or their insurance company made certain promises and it never made it to the insurance company's record. Even more frequently, a patient or their provider will find that their interaction actually wasn't accurately documented and there's absolutely no proof of what really occurred. So you want to keep a full file documenting all interactions with your insurance company, and most important, sending a memorialization of your conversations directly to the insurance company so they know that you documented it and it makes it into their file. The fourth tip is to educate your outpatient treatment providers early. Now you want to educate them on your policy, your condition, and the health insurance claims process in general. You educate them on the policy by actually providing them with a copy of your policy and all applicable guidelines. You want them to have access to this so that they understand the guidelines and can appropriately apply them when taking notes regarding your therapy sessions. Also, if it later becomes necessary for you to enter a higher level of care, they understand what the criteria is and they can accurately explain that in their treatment records. You also want to educate them on your condition, and this you can do by simply providing them with all of the records, your therapy records and your medical records that you've been attaining along the way. You give this to them, and your outpatient treatment provider can then have an accurate history of your therapy, which is important to your treatment, but also important for when they submit the information over to your insurance company. And finally, you want to educate them on the process, explaining to them that they have to accurately and continuously document all communications that they have with your insurance company. and to not only document it in their file, but to submit a memorialization of all conversations over to the insurance company. The fifth tip would be, if it becomes necessary for the patient to enter a higher level of care, the patient or their family members should approach the outpatient treatment providers and request that each of them provide a medical necessity narrative. Now, what a medical necessity narrative is a detailed, comprehensive statement addressing the patient's history, all records, their condition, and their symptoms, and applying that to the medical necessity criteria found in the policy. The purpose of this is to provide a rationale for why the outpatient treatment provider believes that the medical necessity criteria has been met. Personal statements from the patient or the patient's friends and family can be very compelling evidence of the need for treatment. Now, these personal statements should contain direct observations and personal accounts of the patient and their symptoms. You want to talk about how the patient's eating disorder has really affected his or her life and the lives of those around the patient. In addition to, or sometimes in lieu of, personal statements, many people provide video statements or a day in the life video of the patient and their family. This, again, can be very compelling information because it really personalizes the need for treatment rather than having the insurance company simply rely on a paper file. The final tip that I would provide is that if it does become necessary for the patient to enter a higher level of care, the patient and their family educate the treatment team at the eating disorder facility they ultimately enter early. You want to provide them with a copy of your policy, you want to educate them on your condition, and you want to educate them on the health insurance claims process in general, just like you did with your outpatient treatment providers. The treatment team at the eating disorder facility will evaluate the patient to determine the appropriate level of care. And typically, they will contact the insurance company on the patient's behalf to seek approval of the treatment that they determine the patient needs. Now, in order to do this, you want the treatment team to have a copy of the policy and the applicable medical necessity guidelines so that they can appropriately apply those guidelines when talking to the insurance company and documenting their file. You educate the treatment team at the eating disorder facility regarding the patient's condition by simply providing them with all of the medical and therapy records that you've been collecting along the way from your outpatient providers. You would also want to provide them with the medical narrative statements you've obtained from your outpatient providers, the personal statements that you've collected, and any additional information like videos that you may have collected along the way. It's also important to impress upon the treatment team the importance of documenting every communication that they have with your insurance company, especially when they're seeking approval for treatment. You want to explain to them that they should provide all documentation that you provided to them with this initial application for coverage. They should tell the insurance company when they're speaking to them on the phone that all of this information is going to be submitted and that they should wait to render an opinion as to the medical necessity of the treatment until they have had an opportunity to evaluate the information sent over to them. Navigating the health insurance claims process can be extremely frustrating and confusing, especially when you're battling an eating disorder or helping somebody battle an eating disorder. However, a basic understanding of the process and following these few key tips can mean the difference between a claim approval and a claim denial.